The woman accidentally discovered women's lingerie in her husband's bag. She tentatively asked her husband what was going on. Seeing this, her husband hurriedly explained that the lingerie was a new product developed by his company. He might have picked up the wrong size and would bring back another one for her to try next time. As he spoke, he continued tidying up, even selecting a matching lipstick for his wife. Su Fei is the general manager of a company. She and her husband Yan Luan have been married for many years and have a daughter, Yu. Though their relationship had remained loving and sweet over the years, Su Fei had recently grown sensitive. Sensing a crisis in her life, without pausing to consider the truth behind her husband's words, she hurried out after dinner. But as they say, the more you rush, the more likely trouble is to strike. Just outside the residential complex, she nearly collided with a young boy. Fortunately, she braked in time, averting tragedy. Seeing the child was unharmed, Su Fei began scolding the mother. The woman asked Su Fei to leave her phone number in case something happened to her son. This left Su Fei speechless. Just then, her husband Yan Luan approached. The woman froze upon seeing him. Yan Luan also stood rooted to the spot. Her son even called him uncle, but stopped mid-word as his mother quickly silenced him. She then hurriedly led her son away. Looking flustered, all this left Su Fei utterly baffled. But with urgent company matters to attend to, she had no time to dwell on it and left as well. Little did Su Fei know then that this woman would later become her closest confidant. As soon as Su Fei entered the office, she encountered Boss Ding from the partner company, who was storming out in anger. Seeing this, she hurriedly intercepted him and, through her exceptional wit, managed to turn the situation around. Having heard that Su Fei's company was hiring a driver, Boss Ding casually offered to recommend someone. Owing to the favor and the unpleasantness from that morning, Su Fei readily agreed, but she never imagined that the applicant would be the very woman from earlier. Li Lin was a single mother. Upon seeing Su Fei, she knew this interview was hopeless, so she casually placed her resume on the table. Su Fei merely went through the motions. A client's referral had to be hired. Glancing through the resume, she discovered Li Lin lived right below her apartment. Their upscale neighborhood was clearly beyond Li Lin's means based on her attire. Su Fei asked a few casual questions. Since Li Lin came via client referral, Su Fei told her to start work the next day. Yet she couldn't resist asking a curious question. Li Lin answered readily, and Su Fei didn't think much of it. But the next second, Li Lin accidentally glanced at the family photo on the table, and her expression instantly tensed up. This scene was also caught by Su Fei. She recalled the pink lingerie she had seen in her husband's bag that morning. Could her husband really be connected to Li Lin? After work, Yan Luan came to pick up Su Fei for dinner. Su Fei immediately detected an unfamiliar perfume scent wafting through the car. Yan Luan hastily opened the window to air it out, but Su Fei promptly closed it again. Yan Luan felt immense tension, yet quickly devised a plan. He explained he'd just dropped off a female client. The couple returned home, each harboring their own suspicions. That evening, Su Fei went downstairs to retrieve her daughter's forgotten tablet from the car. She discovered a damaged plastic monkey head in the back seat. It looked familiar, as if she'd seen it somewhere before. Suddenly, the Sun Wukong keychain on Li Lin's bag flashed into her mind. When she returned, she encountered her husband heading downstairs to take out the trash, but the elevator stopped at the 11th floor. Suddenly, she remembered Li Lin lived on the 11th floor. To confirm her suspicions, Su Fei brought takeout to Li Lin's residence. Li Lin's son, Li Kong, answered the door. Su Fei immediately spotted a backpack on the table. The headless monkey torso hung from the backpack's zipper. While Li Kong wasn't looking, Su Fei took the ornament. Just then, Li Lin returned. Quick-witted, Su Fei made up an excuse about unexpected overtime. Li Lin didn't suspect anything, saying she had plans to take her son out the next day and couldn't work late. Hearing this, Su Fei recalled her husband was leaving on a business trip the very next day. Suspicion about their relationship began to gnaw at her. Afterwards, Su Fei walked home in a daze. She had never imagined her marriage could be in trouble. Deep down, she still clung to a sliver of hope that everything she suspected was wrong. But when she tried to reassemble the monkey head and body, a complete Sun Wukong pendant shattered the family like a bolt from the blue. Early the next morning, Su Fei tentatively questioned her husband. Seeing Yan Luan squander his last chance for honesty, Su Fei said no more. She hailed a taxi and followed him. After dropping off his daughter, Yan Luan headed to an art gallery. But when Su Fei got out of the taxi, he was nowhere to be found. With no other choice, She went inside to search. Unexpectedly, she saw Li Lin shopping at the supermarket with her son. She silently followed the pair. Suddenly, she witnessed a masked man attempting to harm Li Lin's son. She and Li Lin worked together to save Li Kong, but the masked man still escaped. Left with no option, Li Lin returned home to comfort her son. Meanwhile, Su Fei learned from Li Kong that Yan Luan had indeed been unfaithful. When Li Lin returned, Su Fei confronted her directly, asking if she knew Yan Luan. Li Lin replied, "But you're divorced, aren't you?" It turned out Yan Luan's affair was with Ding Man, the daughter of Su Fei's business partner, Boss Ding. Ding Man and Li Lin were college classmates and close friends. Despite their strong bond, Li Lin had deliberately concealed her identity, telling others that Yan Luan had long been divorced. Meanwhile, Yan Luan was entangled with his lover. The pink lingerie from that day had been deliberately left by his mistress to provoke Su Fei. Though Li Lin didn't reveal Yan Luan's lover's identity, Su Fei suspected it was someone she knew well. She blocked her husband's car, demanding an explanation. Yan Luan reacted swiftly, lying that he'd been at the art gallery selecting gifts for a client. Su Fei already knew about his affair. His excuses only deepened her heartbreak. Finally, Yan Luan excused himself with work commitments and left the scene. Su Fei quietly investigated the gallery's director. To her utter shock, it was Boss Ding's daughter. She called and demanded Ding Man's WeChat. Through her moments, she uncovered photos of her wearing the same lingerie. Su Fei's mind was in turmoil. Before she could process her husband's betrayal, a call from the bank jolted her. Su Fei never dreamed her husband had secretly transferred the family's assets. Bank staff revealed he'd withdrawn 3 million yuan from their joint account. Furious, she stormed into his office with the bank statement to confront him. But Yan Luan was prepared. Calmly, he produced a real estate investment proposal, explaining the true destination of the funds and promising future profits. But after reading it, Su Fei's fury only intensified. She had never approved this project in the first place. Now Yan Luan had forged her signature behind her back to withdraw the money and invest it in this venture. The couple argued fiercely over the 3 million yuan. Ding Man's informant within the company promptly relayed this news to her. This information filled Ding Man with smug satisfaction. Meanwhile, Su Fei confronted her husband directly about Ding Man. Yan Luan was caught off guard, unsure how Su Fei had uncovered Ding Man's involvement. Seeing this, Su Fei grabbed his phone, demanding to check their chat history. But Yan Luan hadn't had time to delete anything, and he certainly wasn't going to open it willingly. In a flash of desperation, he quickly dialed Ding Man instead, setting up a confrontation for the following afternoon at the art museum. His shameless maneuver caught both women off guard. Yan Luan knew this was the only way to placate Su Fei, yet he also feared Ding Man might refuse to cooperate. That very night, he messaged Ding Man, coaxing her to help him handle Su Fei. But Ding Man was in a foul mood over the day's events. She dragged her rowdy friends to a bar, got completely wasted, and ignored Yan Luan entirely. The next day, Su Fei and Yan Luan arrived at the art gallery as agreed. Ding Man had been waiting there for quite some time, heavily made up and flaunting her youth. She struck a bold pose, but Su Fei, equally dressed to impress, arrived radiant and confident. Holding her own against Ding Man, the two engaged in a sharp, fiery verbal duel. Yan Luan, caught between them, looked like a puppet on strings. He let Su Fei pull him along, showcasing years of marital affection. Watching their display of love, Ding Man could only stew in silent anger before finding an excuse to leave. But then, Su Fei deliberately told Yan Luan that their daughter would be competing in Nan'an City the next day, and she had commitments that kept her from leaving. She was certain Ding Man wouldn't pass up this opportunity. This way, she could conveniently obtain evidence of her husband's infidelity. After Su Fei and Yan Luan departed, Li Lin decided she couldn't stay in Ding Man's house any longer. She handed Ding Man the rent, stating she'd move out promptly, and warned both Ding Man and Yan Luan to stop their wrongdoings. But Ding Man had no moral boundaries and dismissed Li Lin's words with contempt. Before long, she found herself alone at Su Fei's doorstep. Yan Luan hurriedly pulled her into the stairwell, sweet-talking her to calm her down, and promising to accompany her for a romantic getaway in Nan'an the next day. Only then did Ding Man leave satisfied. Feeling guilty toward Su Fei, Li Lin tried to express her concern, but Su Fei didn't blame her for Ding Man's actions. Considering Li Lin's financial struggles raising a child alone, Su Fei recalled the company driver had resigned and suggested Li Lin take over driving the business vehicle. This way, she could earn an extra income. Additionally, Su Fei asked Li Lin to arrange a meeting between herself and Ding Man. Li Lin was deeply grateful and promised to do her best. That evening, Su Fei packed her daughter's luggage. Watching the joyful father-daughter pair before her, a pang of sadness washed over her. Just then, Li Lin called to inform her truthfully that Ding Man had left for a business trip to Nan'an. Su Fei froze upon hearing the news. She steadied her emotions and resolved to take action. So, as soon as Yan Luan arrived in Nan'an, she rushed there too. Yan Luan had just finished showering and was waiting for Ding Man to find him. Hearing the knock, he opened the door full of anticipation, but the person who appeared caught him completely off guard. Su Fei had deliberately arranged for Yan Luan to accompany their daughter to Nan'an for the competition precisely to catch him in the act. Da Zhuang froze instantly upon seeing his wife. Su Fei clearly saw the panic in his expression, but she feigned complete ignorance while silently plotting her next move. It must be said that Yan Luan possessed remarkable composure. He made various excuses to stall Su Fei, yet these no longer held any allure in Su Fei's eyes. Just as Yan Luan leaned in to kiss her, she used the excuse of needing to shower to evade him. At that very moment, the doorbell rang. Yan Luan stared nervously at the door, dreading it might be Ding Man. Su Fei opened the door directly. Seeing it was room service, Yan Luan breathed a sigh of relief. It wasn't until the second time that Ding Man herself arrived. At that moment, Su Fei was in the bathroom taking a call. Yan Luan, unable to spare time for lengthy explanations with Ding Man, simply shut her out. Left with no choice, Ding Man stormed back to her own room in a huff, and thus, Su Fei's plan succeeded. The thought of her cheating husband made Su Fei feel sick, so, upon exiting, she lied, claiming she needed to meet a client. As she left, she deliberately flashed the condoms in her clutch. Yan Luan's expression darkened. Though suspicious, he kept his doubts to himself. After Su Fei departed, he even rushed to apologize to Ding Man, winning her forgiveness once more. Following their passionate encounter, Ding Man dragged Yan Luan to view a light art exhibition. Under Yan Luan's sweet talk, she succumbed, embracing and kissing him publicly. This scene had already been recorded by Su Fei on her phone. She then deliberately called Yan Luan, using her daughter's debate competition as an excuse to send him away. Watching Wei Luan rush off, Ding Man couldn't hide her disappointment. Su Fei walked over and confronted her. "How long have you been with Yan Luan?" Expecting Ding Man to crumble. But Ding Man, cherished like a precious jewel by her parents, was born with an air of superiority. Even as the third party, she remained haughty, accusing Su Fei of being the real intruder in their relationship. Facing Ding Man's provocation, Su Fei remained composed and calm. Her words were laced with subtle jabs, implying they were two scum who were perfectly matched. She even offered to initiate the divorce, but only if Yan Luan chose to end it. Since Ding Man kept insisting Yan Luan loved her, she wanted to see if he would divorce her. With that, she turned and walked away. To say Su Fei had no feelings for Yan Luan would be pure self-deception. After all, they had been in love since university, marrying after graduation. Nan'an was where they spent their honeymoon. Su Fei arrived at the seaside they often visited. Recalling past happiness, she slipped off her ring and flung it into the sea. It held her cherished memories. Yet now, everything had changed beyond recognition. Just as Su Fei felt lost about her future, Li Lin suddenly called to check on her. In that moment, Su Fei shed her facade and broke down in uncontrollable tears. She poured out her pent-up emotions to Li Lin. Li Lin listened silently to her outpouring. Then she comforted Su Fei, urging her to take care of herself and not let a scumbag drag her down. These words felt like a glimmer of light in the darkest hour, dispelling the gloom deep within Su Fei. Ding Man eagerly shared Su Fei's divorce plan with Yan Luan, but Yan Luan remained completely unfazed. He bought 2 identical necklaces and gave one to Ding Man and the other to Su Fei. However, when he noticed the red marks on Su Fei's neck and her increasingly erratic behavior, he began to suspect she might be cheating. Only when Su Fei claimed she had a business dinner that night and then got into a luxury car behaving intimately with that man did he feel a vague unease. So he followed Su Fei to the hotel, knocked on the door, and saw her in a bathrobe. Rage instantly consumed him. Convinced she was cheating on him with another man, he even lashed out at her. Just then, the sound of running water came from the bathroom. Yan Luan rushed forward regardless. Su Fei grabbed him, demanding he admit his infidelity. Just as Yan Luan was about to burst in, the shower curtain opened. Da Zhuang froze in shock upon seeing his lover in the bathroom, but he quickly realized this was all orchestrated by his wife. Since events had escalated this far, There was no longer any possibility of lying or hiding the truth. The most crucial decision now was choosing between the two women. He hadn't formally divorced Su Fei yet, and Ding Man hadn't given him a clear answer either. So Yan Luan unhesitatingly blamed Su Fei. Ding Man had teamed up with Su Fei because she desperately wanted a proper relationship status. She was confident Dazhuan would choose her, but she never imagined Yan Luan would ultimately abandon her. Hearing this, Ding Man still couldn't believe it. She stepped forward, offering Yan Luan wealth and status, urging him to divorce Su Fei and choose her. But Yan Luan couldn't bring himself to speak. Su Fei, seeing this, pointed out that the person he feared most now wasn't her, but women like Ding Man who clung desperately. Her actions only made men want to avoid her. Ding Man, enraged, ordered Su Fei to shut up. Watching Su Fei fling a necklace identical to hers onto the floor, Ding Man stared in utter disbelief. Su Fei delivered a truly heartless blow. When my wife isn't around, I can tell you I love you and I can tell anyone else the same. Yan Luan, desperate to prove his loyalty to Su Fei, severed ties with Ding Man right in front of her. Ding Man slapped him across the face and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Later, Yan Luan knelt before Su Fei, begging for forgiveness. But Su Fei sneered, "If you can't forgive a woman's infidelity as a man, what right do you have to demand my forgiveness?" It was precisely this that made Su Fei utterly disillusioned with Dazhuan. This marriage was destined to end. Yet, unexpectedly, their 6-year-old daughter, upon learning the news, couldn't comprehend why her parents were divorcing. She understood even less the true reason behind her mother's insistence on ending the marriage. Su Fei clutched her stomach in pain from her daughter's impact. By the time she regained her senses, Yu had vanished. Yan Luan stared at the divorce papers before him. Before he could decide how to respond, Su Fei suddenly called, frantic that their daughter was missing. He immediately drove to pick her up and began searching. They scoured every street and alley, calling countless classmates and parents, all to no avail. Failing to find his daughter, Yan Luan completely lost control. He angrily accused Su Fei of telling their child about the divorce. Suddenly, Yan Luan remembered a place where their daughter might be. Sure enough, when they arrived, Yu was sitting by the bridge, lost in thought. Upon seeing her parents approach, she shockingly threatened them not to divorce. Ultimately, for her daughter's sake, Su Fei chose to compromise and no longer mention divorce. But Yan Luan, while appearing genuinely remorseful, secretly resumed his affair with Ding Man. When Su Fei received photos from a friend showing the two together again, her heart was utterly broken. Even if that woman hadn't been Ding Man, she would no longer show mercy. In that moment, she resolved to make Yan Luan pay a heavy price. Returning home that evening, Su Fei feigned reconciliation with Yan Luan. She declared she had abandoned thoughts of divorce and was ready to start anew. She suggested hosting a party for their upcoming 11th wedding anniversary to celebrate with friends. Yan Luan was delighted and immediately began preparations. Convinced this chapter was finally closed, he had no idea a bigger surprise awaited him. The anniversary arrived, and Yan Luan invited their company leaders and colleagues to attend. Even Li Lin mistakenly believed Su Fei had forgiven the scumbag. But just as Yan Luan made a heartfelt confession and leaned in to kiss Su Fei, she coldly dodged him and grabbed the remote to turn on the TV. The screen displayed photos of Yan Luan and Ding Man having an affair. Everyone watched in stunned silence, unable to believe the seemingly respectable Yan Luan would do such a thing. After seeing the photos, Yan Luan showed no remorse. Instead, he smashed the TV and demanded to know what Su Fei was trying to do. Just then, Su Fei's younger brother arrived at the party. Seeing his sister treated this way, he immediately charged forward and beat the shameless man senseless. This wedding anniversary celebration, once filled with everyone's blessings, ended in the humiliating spectacle of infidelity. After the guests had all left, Yan Luan flew into a rage. He accused Su Fei of ruining his reputation and making this scandal public knowledge. Seeing his unrepentant demeanor, Su Fei felt her earlier retaliation had been too lenient. Yan Luan remained aggressive, even insisting his mistake deserved forgiveness and understanding. He admitted the affair was his fault, but claimed it had nothing to do with his love for Su Fei. He also stated he had gone to Ding Man to break up with her. He demanded to know why Su Fei couldn't trust him. These words struck Su Fei as nothing but bitter irony. After Yan Luan left, she packed away every trace of him in boxes. Then she sat alone on the sofa, her heart heavy with sorrow. Unexpectedly, her daughter returned and immediately blamed her. "Why won't you forgive Dad? Why did you kick him out?" Faced with her daughter's questioning, Su Fei found no words to explain. A deep rift formed between mother and daughter. Yan Luan sat by the river, drowning his sorrows in alcohol, already reeling from a devastating blow. He now faced imminent dismissal from his company due to a failed investment project. After this incident, Su Fei noticed she'd been losing her appetite and experiencing nausea and vomiting. She took a test. Unsurprisingly, the clear double lines on the pregnancy test confirmed she was expecting. Su Fei struggled to process the news. Her emotions in turmoil. Her closest lover became her deadliest enemy. Her most cherished daughter now regarded her as an adversary. This family resembled a shattered vase. Yet life must go on. Su Fei regained her composure and returned to work, handling collaborative affairs with ease. But investor boss Ding pressured her to make concessions over the contract. Colleague Shi Bin, feeling for Su Fei, confronted Boss Ding directly and revealed the situation. He laid bare how Boss Ding's daughter had wrecked Su Fei's marriage. Boss Ding was stunned upon learning the truth. Determined never to see Yan Luan again, Su Fei entrusted her divorce proceedings entirely to her lawyer. Soon, Yan Weiluan received the divorce petition, meaning he'd walk away with nothing. Stripped of everything, Yan Weiluan glimpsed hope in the depths of despair when he saw Ding Man's social media post. He deliberately let his secretary, Su Ya, know of his plight, giving her the chance to contact Ding Man and bring up the divorce. Sure enough, upon hearing the news, Ding Man immediately cancelled her flight abroad and returned home with her luggage. Seeing his daughter back, Boss Ding instantly understood her intentions. Yet Ding Man, determined to rekindle her relationship with Yan Luan, was willing to cut off the living expenses her father provided. Before long, Yan Weiluan tracked Ding Man's whereabouts through her social media. He deliberately made himself look utterly haggard, removed his wedding ring, and staged a chance encounter with Ding Man. True to form, though Ding Man felt a pang of pity upon seeing him, she still put on an act of cold indifference, hurling a few taunts to settle old scores. Yan Luan played along, producing a bank card and declaring the 300,000 yuan from the car sale was compensation for his past debts to her. Unsurprisingly, this tactic completely won Ding Man over. The two reconciled once more. Meanwhile, Su Fei was deeply troubled by the life growing inside her. The divorce proceedings and the struggle to win back her daughter's affection had left her physically and emotionally drained. At work, she faced the immense challenge of the company's restructuring. Approaching 40, she felt utterly powerless. Li Lin, a single mother, empathized deeply and offered her own experiences as guidance. Whatever decision Su Fei made, she would stand by her unconditionally. But before Su Fei could choose her path, she suffered a miscarriage on the day of the divorce, driven to it by the anger Yan Luan and Ding Man had inflicted. Upon learning of her sister's miscarriage, Su Ge raced to confront Yan Luan, only to be stopped by Li Lin. She intervened to prevent him from making impulsive, destructive decisions in his grief. Due to her severe weakness, Su Fei needed several more days of hospital rest. Li Lin and Su Ge took turns caring for her by her side. Su Ge felt heartbroken for his sister, believing her years of sincere devotion had been wasted. But Li Lin thought recognizing the scumbag's true colors early was actually fortunate. At least she wouldn't remain trapped in a mistaken relationship forever. Fortunately, Su Fei had loving family and friends by her side, bringing light to her darkest hour. Yet even after her discharge, her daughter remained cold toward her. Her mind was solely on her father, showing no concern for where her mother had been during those days of absence. She offered no response to Su Fei's embrace. Just then, Su Fei's best friend, He Mingli, rushed over, sobbing about her husband's infidelity. But though she came to cry every time, she always forgave him. Over time, this gradually eroded Su Fei's patience and sympathy. In Su Fei's view, one act of infidelity meant lifelong betrayal. Yet her friend would always come crying to her after discovering it. After consoling her, she'd turn around and forgive him. It was impossible to feel sympathy. It was precisely He Li's situation that forced Su Fei to reopen that scar. A series of dramatic changes inflicted indelible trauma upon her. Li Lin, concerned about Su Fei's state, took leave to stay home and watch over her. Suddenly, she found the bathroom door locked. Opening it, she found Su Fei sobbing uncontrollably in her arms. As Su Fei gradually calmed down, she came to understand everything. In this marriage, there could be no winners, and she wasn't truly the loser either. Even if divorce tore her heart apart, she couldn't live in deception. Time would be the best medicine for healing. Li Lin was delighted Su Fei had found closure and presented her with a ring. Though inexpensive, it was a token of goodwill to celebrate Su Fei's newfound freedom. After that night of heartfelt conversation, Su Fei and Li Lin became confidants who shared everything. Early the next morning, her best friend came knocking again. Long oppressed, she decided to fight back and sought help from Su Fei and Li Lin. The three women thus formed a Women's Avengers Alliance. They went to where her best friend's husband was and snapped photos of him relentlessly. At first, Sunwei seemed somewhat wary upon seeing Su Fei and the others, but when he spotted his wife behind them, he instantly became extremely aggressive, threatening to strike her. Fortunately, Li Lin easily subdued him. The trio then called the traffic police to report Sunwei for drunk driving. They truly avenged their friend's grievances. The friend vowed not to endure silently anymore, choosing instead to wield the law to protect her rights. From then on, Li Lin moved into Su Fei's home with her son, Li Kong. After school that day, An Luo dropped off the two children at the community gate and left. Yu tricked Li Kong away first to see his father, Yan Luan, who had clearly cheated and divorced, put on a show in front of his daughter. Hearing this made Yu feel even more sorry for her father. After returning home, she became colder toward Su Fei, even ignoring her completely. Only then did Li Lin realize Li Kong was missing. It turned out Li Lin had only stepped out with Su Fei for a moment before her son vanished. But the elevator area was a surveillance blind spot, making it impossible to track Li Kang's whereabouts. Just as everyone was at their wits' end, Li Lin suddenly received a text from Pang Xin telling her not to call the police and to come to his place first, for her son's safety. Li Lin had no time to think and lied to Su Gu and Su Fei, saying the child had been found. Li Lin's behavior made Su Fei and Su Gu feel very strange. Upon arriving at Pang Xin's residence, Li Lin finally learned the truth. The kidnappers, discovering Li Kong was Pang Xin's illegitimate son, had abducted him, demanding 3 million yuan. Their primary demand was no police involvement, or they would kill the child. Pang Xin was Li Kang's biological father. Years ago, when Li Lin was still a university student, she met Pang Xin. Pang Xin concealed his married status while pursuing her. Upon discovering his marital status, Li Lin decisively ended the relationship. Her strong moral principles forbade her from engaging in such unethical behavior. Unexpectedly, she discovered she was pregnant after leaving him. To raise the child, she dropped out of school midway and lived solely for her child. Somehow, Pang Xin learned Li Lin had given birth. He dispatched someone to obtain a blood sample from Li Kong for a paternity test. The masked man Li Lin encountered at the supermarket was sent by Pang Xin. He successfully obtained Li Kang's blood sample. After the paternity test confirmed Li Kong was his son, Pang Xin attempted to negotiate with Li Lin to reclaim the child, but Li Lin refused outright, insisting she had ended their relationship and the child had no connection to him. But Pang Xin never imagined the kidnapper would be the very man he sent. Upon learning Li Kang's identity, the man harbored evil intentions, abducting him to demand an exorbitant ransom. Su Fei grew increasingly suspicious. Knowing Li Lin's temperament, she wouldn't remain so calm, so she took her younger brother to continue investigating the neighborhood surveillance. Soon, they identified a suspect, a masked man carrying a suitcase. Su Fei recognized him as the man who had made advances toward Li Kong at the supermarket days earlier. They immediately realized the child had been abducted. Li Lin, momentarily paralyzed, decided to attempt paying the ransom to secure her son's release. But the kidnappers were cunning. They failed to appear at the agreed time. Instead, they deceived Pang Xin into handing over 3 million yuan through another scheme. Li Lin directly followed the man to his car. Outnumbered 2 to 1, she subdued both men and demanded information about her son. Enraged, the kidnapper drew a dagger and lunged at Li Lin. At the critical moment, Pang Xin stepped forward and took the blow for her. Just then, Su Fei arrived with police, successfully rescuing Li Kong. Pang Xin, wounded from blocking the knife, was rushed to the hospital. Li Lin waited anxiously outside the operating room, entrusting her son to Su Ji's care. Su Fei sensed the deep bond between Li Lin and Pang Xin, believing friends should be open with each other. But how could Li Lin not want to tell Su Fei the truth? After much internal struggle, she still couldn't muster the courage. She knew Su Fei's marriage had ended because of a third party, and she herself was the third party in Pang Xin's marriage. Though she said nothing, Su Fei didn't blame her and still regarded her as a good friend. Fortunately, Pang Xin's surgery went smoothly, and he would only need a period of rest before being discharged. The next day, Li Lin brought Li Kong to the hospital to visit and let the father and son spend time alone. This stirred up a whirlwind of emotions within Pang Xin. Seizing the moment, He made an awkward request of Li Lin. Just as Li Lin hesitated to respond, Boss Ding and his daughter arrived to visit Pang Xin. Ever since Li Lin learned Ding Man's true character, their relationship had grown increasingly distant. Yet Ding Man saw no fault in herself, instead lacing her words with subtle jabs at Li Lin. Convinced she understood everything, Ding Man felt Li Lin had no right to lecture her. Li Lin retorted directly that Ding Man was unworthy of being compared to her. She had been deceived back then, and now she could never accept a married man as her son's father. She urged Ding Man to distance herself from Yan Weiluan immediately, warning that this man was fundamentally unscrupulous. Yet Ding Man, already intoxicated by Yan Luan's sweet talk, paid no heed to her words. Just as Li Lin thought her entanglement with Pang Xin had ended, Pang Xin unexpectedly leveraged his position to threaten Su Fei into helping him. He demanded Su Fei persuade Li Lin to take her son to see his gravely ill father. Su Fei had long regarded Li Lin as her closest friend. After much deliberation, she still resolved to refuse Pang Xin to help Su Fei's company weather its crisis. Li Lin directly agreed to Pang Xin's demand. Su Fei's company had signed a performance-based agreement with Pang Xin as an investor. With the deadline looming and the stringent performance targets still far out of reach, coupled with Yan Luan's 3 million yuan loan remaining unpaid, she had no choice but to consider mortgaging her house for a loan. Li Lin, fully aware of Su Fei's predicament, directly messaged Pang Xin and agreed to his request. The next day, on the way to the nursing home, Pang Xin boasted to Li Lin about his business empire, as arrogant as ever, not a bit changed from previous years. This reminded Li Lin of their first meeting during a corporate recruitment event back in college. Young and naive then, she'd quickly fallen for Pang Xin's mature, wise charm, gradually becoming deeply involved with him. But she was no longer that person. She now scoffed at so-called grand dreams. After the child met Pang's father, Pang Xin drove Li Lin and her son home, wanting to see their living conditions, and even contemplating how to have his son acknowledge his paternal lineage. Li Lin remained unaware of his intentions, believing this would be their final interaction. Boss Ding arranged a private meeting with Yan Luan, offering a substantial sum to demand he leave his daughter. Yan Luan naturally refused, yet Boss Ding's next words left him stunned and humiliated. "While I absolutely refuse to consent to your marriage, I won't oppose you dating. After all, a girl needs to experience a few unscrupulous men to mature, right?" Boss Ding assumed Yan Luan would back down, but to his utter surprise, Yan Luan accompanied his daughter straight to their home, desperate to marry into wealth. Yan Luan humbled himself to curry favor with Boss Ding. Boss Ding, however, saw him as a shameless man. He believed Yan Luan was only with his daughter for her family's fortune and status. But Ding Man, caught up in the heat of passion, remained oblivious. Instead, she felt her father's attitude was outrageous. The two erupted into a fierce argument over Yan Luan, ending in bitter discord. Boss Ding never imagined that his interference would inadvertently fuel his daughter's rebellious streak. Without hesitation, she sold the art gallery to help Yan Luan pay off his debts. She even declared that from now on, their assets would be shared. Upon hearing this, Yan Luan feigned emotion and embraced Ding Man. That single-word wife completely ensnared Ding Man. Meanwhile, Pang Xin delivered Li Lin to Su Fei's residence. Su Gu instantly sensed the unusual nature of their relationship. To assert his claim, he deliberately declared his pursuit of Li Lin in front of Pang Xin. This left Pang Xin deeply unsettled. He absolutely refused to tolerate any other man near Li Lin. That same night, he uncovered that Su Gu was Li Kang's kindergarten teacher and arranged a meeting with the principal. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, a man tracked down Su Fei. This man was the head of a matchmaking website. It turned out that Su Fei had previously seen her best friend's husband posting a marriage ad on the platform and had complained to Sherbin about such an unscrupulous website. Sherbin then used technical and promotional tactics to ruin the website's reputation. The site's manager, Ya Kai, was forced to meet Su Fei personally. Ya Kai explained his purpose: to turn hostility into friendship and avoid escalating the situation. Either Queen Company would compensate them for their losses, or the two companies would collaborate. However, Su Fei rejected both solutions. Just as she was about to leave, Ding Man walked in arm with Yan Weiluan. The shameless Yan Luan, seeing Ye Kai beside Su Fei, mocked her as a flighty woman. Without a shred of shame, despite being the one who had cheated, Su Fei, refusing to be outdone, fired back immediately, accusing the two of colluding and being unworthy of being mentioned in the same breath as her. Ya Kai, standing nearby, initially didn't want to get involved, but upon seeing the dynamics between the three, could no longer stand Ding Man and Yan Luan's aggressive, ugly demeanor. These words filled Ding Man with fury, leaving her no outlet for her rage. Because of this, she had absolutely no interest in trying on wedding dresses. Yan Luan realized this was unacceptable. He had finally hooked a wealthy woman and needed to marry her quickly. After all, he was now penniless and unemployed, relying entirely on the woman before him. This instantly soothed Ding Man, though he was the one who cheated. When he accidentally glimpsed Su Fei and Yakai playing outside the window, he suddenly felt like the victim. But after Ding Man returned home, having been placated, she rummaged through Yan Luan's suitcase and found matching family outfits for three. Furious, she confronted him, demanding if he still couldn't stop thinking about Su Fei. Yan Luan, a habitual liar, remained utterly composed. He snatched the clothes and tossed them straight into the trash, claiming he must have accidentally packed them while organizing his belongings. Simultaneously, he showed Ding Man his computer desktop, insisting he was working hard for their future together. This explanation instantly dispelled Ding Man's suspicions. Just as the couple was getting intimate, Su Fei suddenly called, pressing him about the 3 million yuan. Yan Luan gave a perfunctory response before hanging up. Ding Man sank deeper into Yan Luan's world with each honey he uttered, completely forgetting that Yan Luan's poor investment judgment was widely known in the industry. After meeting with the principal, Pang Xin was immediately warned to keep her distance from student parents, but Su Ge felt resentful at the school's excessive interference in her romantic freedom. After work, Su Ge bought a bouquet of flowers, intending to confess to Li Lin. Unfortunately, Li Lin was allergic to pollen, and the confession ended in failure before it even began. Still, he refused to give up. He invited both of them to play trampoline over the weekend. Afterward, he seized the moment and mustered the courage to confess. But after he finished speaking, Li Lin remained silent. Leaning closer, he discovered Li Lin had fallen asleep. In truth, Li Lin had overheard An Luo's words and understood his feelings, but her current state made it impossible to respond, so she pretended to be asleep. Seeing that Su Ge wouldn't budge, the principal informed Su Fei. Su Fei summoned her brother to the company and warned him to abandon his pursuit of Li Lin. It wasn't that she thought Li Lin was beneath her brother, it was because Li Lin needed to focus on her life path, not romantic love. Yet Su Ge was convinced he could offer Li Lin a brighter future. He even suspected Pang Xin was interfering in Li Lin's life, including arranging her promotion to assistant. Faced with Su Ji's accusations, Su Fei remained silent. Her silence was tacit acknowledgement. Just as Su Fei picked up her cup to make coffee, she discovered Li Lin standing at the doorway. Without a word, Li Lin turned and walked away. Su Fei didn't want to lose this friend, so she proactively sought out Li Lin to ask about her relationship with Pang Xin. But Li Lin wasn't ready to reveal everything. The more she held back, the deeper Su Fei's misunderstanding grew. Pang Xin approached Li Lin again, seeking to regain custody of their son. Li Lin naturally refused. To gain legitimate access to her son, Pang Xin invested in his kindergarten. When the kindergarten organized a spring outing, Pang Xin, as an investor, naturally participated. Not only did he deliberately get close to Li Kong, but he also revealed his relationship with Li Kong to Su Ge. After hearing this, Su Ge found it hard to accept. He went straight to Li Lin to demand the truth. Li Lin, not wanting to waste Su Ji's time, coldly admitted she had once been someone's mistress. Truthfully, Li Lin still harbored some affection for Su Ge, yet it wasn't enough to muster the courage for a new relationship. The vast age gap made Su Ji's childishness and cheerfulness unable to provide her with security. But she never imagined Su Ge would be forced to resign because of her. She promptly informed Su Fei about Su Ji's resignation. Su Fei knew Pang Xin was behind it all. As the company's largest investor, however, she was powerless to intervene. After all, a job could always be found again. But Li Lin vowed she would never let Pang Xin off the hook. Meanwhile, Pang Xin's wife, Wu Yuan, returned from abroad with their daughter. This news caught Pang Xin completely off guard, yet he had no choice but to personally meet them at the airport. Having lived apart for years, with their daughter residing with her mother, she harbored little affection for Pang Xin. Pang Xin, in turn, felt no deep connection to this daughter and paid little heed to her attitude. That evening, he deliberately hosted a banquet to welcome his wife and daughter, inviting company shareholders to attend. But his daughter disliked such staged events. She left the table midway to meet with her friends, plunging the gathering into awkwardness. Yet upper-class marriages differ from ordinary ones. Wu Yuan's return wasn't to reconnect with her husband but to stake her claim on the company's inheritance. Through her contacts in China, she learned Pang Xian's illegitimate son had already met with the old patriarch. Fearing the family fortune would be seized by this illegitimate child, she hurriedly brought her daughter back to China. Pang Xian's deliberate targeting of Su Ge had finally crossed Li Lin's boundaries. The next day, she confronted him at the company, demanding he stay out of her life. Unexpectedly, Pang Xian tried to persuade Li Lin to return with the child. He showed no awareness that this would hurt both women. As long as Pang Xian remained married, Li Lin would forever be an illegitimate third party. Li Kong, too, would forever bear the stigma of being an illegitimate child. Thus, Li Lin firmly rejected Pang Xian and threatened that if he continued harassing her, she would reveal the truth to his wife, Wu Yuan. Just as their argument escalated, Wu Yuan unexpectedly arrived at the company. Fearing exposure, Pang Xian lied that Li Lin was there for a job interview and shot her a warning glance. Though Li Lin seethed inwardly, she eventually suppressed her anger and kept silent. Yan Luan made a small profit in the investment market and immediately returned 3 million to Su Fei. He then handed the remaining 2 million to Ding Man, seizing her moment of happiness. Yan Luan proposed meeting her parents to discuss marriage. Without hesitation, Ding Man agreed to bring him home. To secure Boss Ding's approval for their marriage, she even lied about being pregnant. This utterly terrified Boss Ding. Yan Weiluan, seeing the panic, quickly clarified that Ding Man was joking. He then earnestly pleaded with Boss Ding to give him a chance. Even though Yan Weiluan was now single and possessed some investment acumen, his character still failed to earn Boss Ding's trust. Ultimately, he couldn't resist his daughter's plea and agreed to the marriage. The condition, however, was that they couldn't register their marriage. Yan Luan swallowed his pride and accepted Boss Ding's terms, but he also made his own demand to work at LG Group for his daughter's future. Boss Ding agreed. Since divorcing Su Fei, Yan Luan's seemingly glamorous life was nothing but a burden of humiliation. His dignity lay trampled on the ground, and he blamed all his misfortune on Su Fei. After drinking, he stumbled out of the bar and spotted Su Fei nearby. Su Fei merely turned to walk away, unwilling to acknowledge him, but Yan Luan refused to let her go, persistently tugging at her. Just then, Li Lin arrived in time to intervene. Yan Luan lashed out, accusing Li Lin of failing to seduce Pang Xian and now sabotaging others' families. Unable to bear his insults toward Li Lin, Su Fei stepped forward and slapped him. Yan Luan retaliated by striking Su Fei. Enraged by his audacity, Li Lin grabbed a wine bottle, ready to smash it. She confronted him, demanding why he hadn't considered the consequences when he couldn't control his desires and cheated. Just as Yan Luan prepared to retort, the bar owner intervened, breaking the tense standoff. After Yan Luan left, Su Fei apologized to Li Lin. The two headed to a nearby spot for a late-night snack. Li Lin seized the moment to confess her past with Pang Xian to Su Fei. She admitted being deceived by Pang Xian in college. Upon learning the truth, she decisively cut ties and moved far away. Su Fei felt deeply for her upon hearing this. Their mutual resentment dissolved completely, and they became close friends who knew each other's deepest secrets. Unexpectedly, Ding Man invited Su Fei to the wedding specifically to prove she was more suited for Yan Luan than Su Fei. Not only that, but Li Lin and Ye Kai also received invitations. On the wedding day, Su Fei initially planned to dress up elegantly, but after careful consideration, she opted for a simpler outfit instead. Yan Luan was visibly startled by her presence. Boss Ding was taken aback by Su Fei's appearance. Ye Kai stepped over, draped an arm around her shoulder, and openly declared they were lovers. This instantly dispelled Boss Ding's concerns, but infuriated Yan Luan to no end. Numerous guests arrived as scheduled, including Pang Xian and Wu Yuan. Li Lin remained impassive upon seeing the pair. As the wedding march played, Ding Man and Yan Luan exchanged rings. Amidst the officiant's blessings, they became husband and wife. Even as she embraced Yan Luan, she shot Su Fei a defiant smirk, but Su Fei couldn't care less. After the ceremony, Ye Kai encountered Yan Luan in the restroom. Their exchange was thick with tension. Yan Luan seized Ye Kai's momentary distraction and shoved him face-first into the sink. Ye Kai wasn't one to take a beating lying down. After gulping down some liquor to steel his nerves, he charged at Yan Luan. In full view of the guests, He berated him for his fickle infidelity, how Ding Man still couldn't let go of his ex-wife. Yet Kai's disruption turned the wedding into a laughingstock in everyone's eyes. Pang Xin couldn't bear to watch and made an excuse to leave. Li Lin had already exchanged greetings with Wu Yuan and swapped contact information before Ye Kai exited. Meanwhile, Sherbin brought colleagues posing as boyfriends to support Su Fei. Surrounded by 3 imposters, Su Fei felt utterly helpless. Yet during the toasts, Yan Luan couldn't resist making a snide remark. His words left the two speechless, forcing them to slink away. After the wedding, Boss Ding returned home and unleashed his fury on Yan Weiluan. He also revealed to Ding Man the truth about why they couldn't register their marriage. Yet Ding Man still defended Yan Weiluan, even arguing with her father. With things having reached this point, Boss Ding no longer wished to interfere and left her to make her own choice. The daytime wedding fiasco didn't dampen Ding Man and Yan Luan's spirits in the slightest. Yet Ding Man harbored lingering suspicions about Yan Luan after Ye Kai's words. She couldn't shake the feeling he and Su Fei shared an ambiguous past. Both carried hidden agendas. Yan Luan had only pursued Ding Man for money. His bond with Su Fei from university to marriage and children remained genuine. Seeing Ye Kai and Su Fei's intimacy at the wedding left a bitter taste in his mouth. Yet to appease Ding Man, he buried all his emotions deep. Ye Kai accompanied Su Fei to a street barbecue stall. Watching her drown her sorrows in alcohol, he couldn't help but feel sympathy for her plight. Before long, Su Fei was dead drunk, utterly lost on her way home. With no other choice, Ye Kai first opened his phone to record video evidence of his innocence, then carried Su Fei to a hotel to rest. Early the next morning, Su Fei woke up in pajamas with Ye Kai lying beside her. Her mind was a blank. She couldn't recall anything from the night before. Fearing Ye Kai might have taken photos, she grabbed his phone, pried open his eyes, unlocked it with facial recognition, and checked the album. She didn't notice Ye Kai had already woken up. She then went to the bathroom to check. Seeing it filled with photos of delicious food, she finally relaxed. Yet when she dressed and cautiously returned the phone, Ye Kai was no longer in bed. To avoid detection, she grabbed her things and prepared to leave, but she was intercepted by Ye Kai, who was eating breakfast. Su Fei had intended for Ye Kai to forget last night's events. Instead, he teased her relentlessly. In a fit of rage, Su Fei crushed his hand with a chair and slipped out of the room. She believed she'd never see Ye Kai again, but upon seeing the promising prospects of the dating website he managed, she sought him out once more to discuss a partnership. Unexpectedly, Ye Kai demanded a 70-30 split, taking 70% for himself and offering Su Fei only 30%. After hearing this, Su Fei left without a word. After Li Lin added Wu Yuan's contact information, she volunteered to become his personal trainer. She arrived at the Pang residence as agreed. The Pang family's maid, mistaking her for a visitor seeking Pang Xin, immediately informed her that Pang Xin wasn't home and suggested she return another day. But just then, Wu Yuan emerged and ushered Li Lin inside. This left the maid utterly baffled. After her workout, as Li Lin prepared to leave, she happened to encounter Pang Xin returning home with his daughter. The perceptive Yu Qin quickly noticed the unusual, deep affection in her father's gaze toward Li Lin. Sensing something amiss in their relationship, she privately warned her mother to be cautious about inviting trouble into the house. But Wu Yuan paid no heed to her concerns. Meanwhile, Pang Xin reached out to Li Lin himself. He warned her not to keep testing his limits. Unfortunately, Li Lin was too self-assured and misjudged her standing in Pang Xin's heart. Not only did he reject Li Lin's threats, he instead instructed Boss Ding to expedite the acquisition of Su Fei's company. Boss Ding then began harassing Queen Company with unreasonable demands, demanding they guarantee over 1 million new users within the first month of launch. Unable to stand by, Li Lin confessed to Su Fei that Pang Xin's latest move was actually targeting him. To resolve this crisis, Su Fei had no choice but to lower his stance, inviting Ye Kai to dinner and agreeing to a 60-40 profit split. Seeing Su Fei so eager to cooperate, Ye Kai quickly guessed there might be internal issues at his company. Seizing the momentum, Su Fei planned an offline launch party. Through everyone's collective efforts, the newly developed software WW company finally went live. Combined with Ye Kai's offline membership event, they finally met Boss Ding's demands. Seeing everyone so exhausted, Li Lin felt deeply guilty. Having navigated the corporate world for years, Su Fei instead urged Li Lin to recognize Pang Xin's true nature. It wasn't until Su Fei saw the video on her phone that she realized she had truly misunderstood Ye Kai. Recalling how she had repaid kindness with injury yesterday, even breaking his hand, she felt even more guilty. To apologize, she specially bought breakfast for Yakai as a gesture of goodwill. Yakai accepted it with a clear conscience, eating her bread while unable to suppress the smile on his lips. Ever since Yenluan joined LG Corporation, he'd been idle day in and day out. Upon learning LG planned to acquire Su Fei's company, he presented a proposal to Boss Ding, eager to join the project. Boss Ding, understanding his motives, declined on grounds of conflict of interest, but Yenluan wouldn't pass up this chance to humiliate Su Fei. He turned instead to the company's chairman, Pang Xin, seeking an opportunity. Pang Xin, already harboring resentment toward Su Fei due to Li Lin, readily agreed. The two men, each with their own agenda, were about to join forces against Su Fei's company. When Yenluan returned home after work, he found Boss Ding preparing to renovate their new apartment. With no other choice, the couple had to temporarily move back into their old apartment. Coincidentally, this apartment was right below Su Fei's residence. Meanwhile, Su Fei continued her battle of wits with her daughter. When Su Fei forbade her from eating snacks or watching tablets, Yu Yu rebelled stubbornly. She even declared Su Fei couldn't care for her as well as her father. These words cut Su Fei deeply. That evening, Yu Yu stumbled upon her father and stepmother's wedding photos while wandering downstairs and followed them out of curiosity. Without informing Su Fei beforehand, this near miss had her panicking over her daughter's disappearance. Meanwhile, Yu Yu was at Yenluan's place, complaining about how ugly their photos were. But Ding Man didn't get angry. Instead, she seized the moment to plant seeds of doubt in her mind. Though Yenluan wasn't a good husband, he was indeed a good father. Watching the two bicker and argue, Yenluan quickly intervened. He stated that if it weren't for Dingman, he wouldn't have a place to live or the chance to make a comeback. If their daughter were to live with him in the future, she'd have to get along well with Dingman. Just then, the movers were heading downstairs. Su Fei, who had gone downstairs searching for her daughter, heard Yenluan's voice and instantly realized her daughter was there. She rushed in, grabbed Yu Yu, and tried to leave. She accused Yenluan of taking her daughter without her consent. She warned that if it happened again, she would definitely call the police. Back home, Yu Yu lay on the bed, quietly sobbing. Seeing this, Su Fei felt uneasy and tried to talk to her gently. Mother and daughter resolved their differences, agreeing Su Fei would be informed before visiting Yenluan. The next morning, LG Company sent representatives to negotiate with Su Fei. Su Fei and Yakai expected Boss Ding, but were surprised to find Yenluan instead. Yenluan immediately intimidated Su Fei upon arriving at the company. The immense sales pressure left Su Fei and Yakai overwhelmed. Upon learning this, Li Lin agreed to appear in promotional materials to help the company weather the crisis and ensure WW Company's short-term performance targets on the condition she wear a helmet to conceal her face. Through everyone's collective efforts, the numbers surged instantly. After Su Ge was rejected by Li Lin, he brought back a new girlfriend to provoke her, but Li Lin remained completely unimpressed. Instead, Su Ge deliberately flaunted his affection in front of her. Even Su Fei could see the underhandedness in his actions. Li Lin didn't want Su Ge to waste a girl's time just to provoke her. She walked right up to the couple and made it clear to Xiao Kuei that she and Su Ge had no relationship. She came now solely as a parent to offer her blessings. Hearing this, Su Ge immediately panicked. Meanwhile, Su Fei sat nearby watching the drama unfold, inwardly marveling at how Li Lin was truly the ultimate actor. Just as Su Fei had suspected, Su Ge and Xiao Kuei weren't a real couple. It was purely Xiao Kuei playing along to test Li Lin's feelings. The condition? A motorcycle as payment. That afternoon, Yenluan returned to Queen Company to find Su Fei. Through the window, he saw Yakai across the street, furious, choking Su Fei by the neck. He suspected she had been cheating on him all along. Su Fei responded with scorn. Yakai sensed Yenluan's hostility and feared he might harm Su Fei. He rushed into the office. Fortunately, it was a false alarm. Yenluan then stated his purpose directly, ordering Queen Company to immediately halt all collaborations with Li Lin. Unexpectedly, Yenluan blocked WW Company's budget to secure Queen Company's cooperation. Left with no choice, Su Fei sought Yakai's help to cover the funds. Without hesitation, Yakai transferred the money to her and declared he would take full responsibility for the project. Soon, WW Company was set to host an offline meet and greet event. Li Lin, as WW Company's star model, was scheduled to meet the public. Just before the event began, Su Ge revealed the entire truth to Li Lin and confessed his feelings once more. This time, Li Lin opened her heart as well. She promised Su Ge she would tell him everything after the event concluded. But no one could have anticipated that an uninvited guest would shatter everything. As Li Lin and Su Ge were performing on stage, a man abruptly cut off the music, declaring himself Li Lin's ex-husband. Though Li Lin had braced herself mentally, she still felt too ashamed to face Su Fei and the others. She submitted her resignation, prepared to leave, and promised to cover all losses. However, Su Fei's focus was elsewhere. She encouraged Li Lin to pull herself together, assuring her they could face any problems together. Ultimately, Li Lin confessed the truth. After she and Pang Xian got together, she quickly became pregnant, but she never imagined Pang Xian was already married. By then, she was already 6 months along. Upholding her principles, she refused to tolerate this situation and bought a ticket home that very night. By chance, she encountered her old classmate Simao at the station. To register the child's household registration, Li Lin chose to marry Simao. Yet after giving birth, Simao immediately changed his attitude, frequently extorting money using the child as leverage. Unable to endure it, Li Lin ended the marriage. But no matter where she went, Simao found her. Negative rumors about Li Lin proliferated, with some even spreading malicious lies to ride the wave of attention. This dragged both Li Lin and Su Fei's company into a scandal crisis. Convinced Yan Luan was behind it, Su Fei ordered an overnight investigation into Simao's background. As expected, Yan Luan showed up the next day, seizing the opportunity to execute his plan to acquire Queen Company. To temporarily placate Yan Luan, Su Fei feigned weakness before him, stating she would submit her resignation and admit regret over the divorce. Yan Luan, smugly satisfied, agreed to give Su Fei 1 week to leave the company. This entire display of weakness was a pre-arranged plan between Su Fei and Ye Kai to quickly find evidence of Simao's manipulation while Yan Luan was off guard. Meanwhile, Li Lin dropped Li Kong off at kindergarten. Unexpectedly, she was recognized by other parents who surrounded and verbally attacked her. Fortunately, Su Ge arrived just in time to take her away. Despite the swirling rumors, Su Ge trusted Li Lin completely. He declared he would never abandon Li Lin, no matter what happened. However, Pang Xian approached Li Lin again, urging her to take the child abroad. He claimed only he could resolve Queen Company's crisis. After hearing this, Li Lin did not respond immediately. As the crisis escalated, netizens conducted a doxing campaign, exposing Li Lin's identity and address. Unable to return home, she temporarily stayed at Su Ji's residence. Moreover, neither Su Fei's nor Ye Kai's companies escaped unscathed. A nationwide boycott campaign demanded WW Company's software be taken down. Not wanting to involve Su Fei, Li Lin decided to accept Pang Xian's living arrangement. Her condition was that LG Group cancel its performance-based agreement with Queen Company. After a moment's hesitation, Pang Xian agreed. That evening, Li Lin visited Su Fei for drinks, yet she never mustered the courage to reveal her plans to leave. The next day, Pang Xian drove Li Lin and her son to the airport, instructing their nanny to report any issues directly to him. But after Pang Xian departed, Li Lin chose to stay and support Su Fei through the crisis. She confessed everything to the public via a live stream. Rather than endure public criticism and abuse, she decided to lay bare her past. Right or wrong, let the public judge. Subsequent investigations by Ye Kai and Su Fei revealed that Simao had been staying in a private room booked by Zhou Dong. Zhou Dong, in turn, was Yan Weiluan's deputy. There must be undisclosed financial ties at play. Ye Kai impersonated Zhou Dong to meet Simao. Su Fei and Sherbin edited Yan Weiluan's recordings and played them while calling Simao to ease his suspicions. Ye Kai met Simao and coaxed him into revealing the truth. To everyone's shock, Simao was actually Pang Xian's mole planted beside Li Lin years ago. Li Lin then went live to publicly share her ordeal. Public opinion instantly shifted, with overwhelming support and encouragement for Li Lin. Li Lin, no longer willing to endure, proactively confronts Wu Yuan to confess the truth. Initially, Wu Yuan assumes she's come to claim her rights, but to his surprise, Li Lin declares she never intended to destroy anyone's family. She was forced into this situation because Pang Xian insisted on taking the child. She hopes Wu Yuan will help her. While they talk, Pang Xian, having received the news, rushes home in a panic. Seeing Li Lin, he froze in shock, but he quickly regained his composure, falsely claiming Li Lin had been persistently pursuing him. Wu Yuan presented Li Lin with 2 choices: take the money and flee with the child, or leave the child in this family. Hearing this, Li Lin felt utterly disillusioned. She never imagined Wu Yuan, as a woman, could tolerate her husband's actions. Any lingering remorse vanished completely. She declared she would never back down and would fight them to the end. At that moment, Su Ge was waiting for her at the door. After Li Lin left, Pang Xian called Yan Luan and ordered him to silence Simao completely, by any means necessary. Yan Luan felt a headache coming on after hearing this. Returning home that evening, he found Ding Man and Yu Yu in another heated argument. Yu Yu, seeing her father return, immediately falsely accused Ding Man of hitting her. Though Yan Luan wasn't a good husband, he was indeed a good father. Hearing his daughter was being bullied, he immediately scolded Ding Man without hesitation. This rebuke left Ding Man utterly stunned. She never imagined the man she considered her true love would treat her this way. She even blurted out, "This is my home. Neither you nor your daughter can ride roughshod over me." Hearing these words, Yan Luan desperately wanted to lash out at Ding Man, but he knew it wasn't time to break ties yet. Forcing himself to swallow his rage and apologize, the love-struck Ding Man was quickly appeased. Just then, Su Fei arrived, but her daughter refused to go back with her. The next day, Pang Xian's company was set to go public, but shareholder Wu Yuan, still holding out over the Li Lin incident, refused to sign. Knowing boss Ding was Wu Yuan's man, Pang Xian sought him out privately. He produced a supplier contract clearly listing Ding Man as the legal representative. Citing boss Ding's abuse of corporate privileges for personal gain, he had him dismissed. All of this was part of his and Yan Luan's plan. After boss Ding's downfall, Yan Luan naturally took his place. Yakai accompanied Su Fei to pick up Yu Yu from school. He even took the opportunity to advise Su Fei to be kinder to her daughter. Yu Yu was initially thrilled to see Su Fei, but upon spotting Yakai behind her, her mood instantly soured. Convinced her mother would follow her father's path and rebuild a family, she felt deeply hurt. Ignoring Su Fei's explanations, she grabbed her backpack and stormed off. When Yan Luan returned home, Ding Man was waiting in the living room. She flung the documents for the new company Yan Luan had registered for her, accusing him of deliberately framing her father. Having gotten what he wanted, Yan Luan shed all pretense. He unleashed all the humiliation he'd endured these past days. His face contorted with rage as he approached Ding Man and began beating her. This scene was witnessed by Yu Yu, who had just returned home. She never imagined the father who had once been so gentle and loving could be such a monster. Terrified, she locked herself in her room and refused to come out. Yu Yu's trust in her father stemmed from Yan Luan's long-cultivated facade of gentleness. Yet witnessing her stepmother's widening pupils and tears of fear and anxiety from the domestic violence was proof enough that her father's image had completely shattered. Li Lin encountered a drunk Ding Man in the bar restroom. The bruises on her face and body instantly revealed Yan Luan as the perpetrator. Just then, Su Fei received a call from her aunt. Learning of Yu Yu's distress, she rushed home immediately. Guessing her daughter had witnessed Yan Luan's violence, Su Fei embraced her tightly to comfort her. Yu Yu clung to her mother, weeping uncontrollably until her emotions gradually calmed. Yet the shadow of her father's domestic violence lingered in her mind, impossible to shake. After comforting her daughter, Su Fei went to find Ding Man. Ding Man sat motionless on the bed, lost in thought. She knew her current predicament was entirely self-inflicted. She cared little for Su Fei's judgment or scorn, but Su Fei didn't blame her. She explained that even without a third party, her marriage to Yan Luan would have ended sooner or later. Yan Luan's insatiable ambition would never be satisfied. Su Fei urged her to think clearly about her next steps. Though Ding Man didn't respond, her mind was already made up. Su Fei asked Li Lin about Ding Man's character and discovered she wasn't fundamentally bad, just a bit spoiled. After all, when Li Lin had nowhere to turn, Ding Man had helped her find work. Early the next morning, Yu Yu woke to a note from her mother. It said she must learn to be a good mother, that they could communicate openly about any issues, and hoped Yu Yu wouldn't run away from her again. Just after reading it, Su Fei entered, and Yu Yu finally voiced the question that had troubled her for so long. After that day, the mother and daughter resolved their misunderstandings, and their relationship gradually warmed. Yu Yu's attitude toward Yakai also began to shift, because she sensed this man genuinely cared for her mother. Wu Yuan remained adamant about refusing to sign the equity agreement. Pang Xian humbled himself to negotiate with her, realizing she was fighting for her daughter's interests. Ultimately, Pang Xian agreed to Wu Yuan's terms, reaching a settlement. He then sent a legal notice to Li Lin demanding custody. Uncertain of her chances, Li Lin followed Su Fei's advice and met directly with Pang Xian's lawyer. She demanded 1 million shares of LG Group stock after its IPO. Upon learning this, Pang Xian flew into a rage and immediately instructed his lawyers to file a lawsuit. He then ordered Yan Luan to expedite the acquisition of Queen Company. To secure the takeover, Yan Luan resorted to underhanded tactics again, falsely reporting that WW Company had leaked user privacy. This ignited a fresh wave of public outrage. Queen Company, which had just begun to recover, plunged back into crisis, with the performance-based agreement nearing its deadline. Su Fei had no choice but to sell his shares to Pang Xian at a low price. The next day, Yan Luan arrived to sign the agreement on Pang Xian's behalf. He gloated triumphantly, taunting Su Fei. Ultimately, Su Fei departed the company with Sherbin and Li Lin. Soon, the day arrived for Li Lin and Pang Xian to contest custody of Li Kong. The first mediation session proceeded under the judge's supervision. The lawyer argued Li Lin lacked the capacity to care for the child. A false kidnapping incident was even fabricated. Li Lin countered that this would never have happened if Pang Xian hadn't sent people to stalk her. She challenged Pang Xian to come clean about his own actions. Before Pang Xian could respond, he suddenly received a call from Wu Yuan. His expression turned frantic as he hurriedly left the courthouse. At the same moment, Wu Yuan arranged for LG Group to issue a public statement denying rumors that the chairman had an illegitimate child. This infuriated Pang Xian. In a fit of rage, he accused Wu Yuan of deceiving him into handing over his shares only to renege on their agreement. Just as everyone was puzzling over Wu Yuan's sudden change of heart, Su Fei stepped forward to confess that she had contacted Wu Yuan through Boss Ding. They had struck a deal. Within a short time frame, Queen Company and WW Company would turn their losses into profits. Furthermore, she could guarantee LG Group's market value would multiply several times over after its IPO. This was precisely why Wu Yuan agreed to handle the matter. Rather than helping Li Lin, it was more about seizing control to prevent Pang Xian from spiraling the situation out of control. Yan Luan proactively messaged his daughter, expressing regret for not spending enough time with her lately. Unbeknownst to him, his violent side had been witnessed by his daughter. After work, he waited at the store for a long time, but Yu never showed up. Though Yu initially didn't want to go, she ultimately couldn't bring herself to sever this father-daughter bond. Arriving at the shop to see her father, she exposed his true nature. Only then did Yan Luan realize that the once close daughter had unknowingly grown distant from him. Yu declared, "Only honest people deserve forgiveness." Yan Luan was utterly speechless. He had no idea what had transpired during this period. He assumed Su Fei had said something to Yu, but Yu's next words left him utterly humiliated. "Dad, will you be an honest person from now on? Please stop hurting Mom and each other, okay?" Meanwhile, Ding Man met with Su Fei to apologize. She lamented that while Su Fei had escaped unscathed, she herself had lost everything. But Su Fei didn't see it that way. She believed some things could only be understood through experience. Fortunately, Ding Man had discovered Yan Luan's true nature in time. At least it wasn't too late yet. The day after Ding Man's awakening, he brought evidence to the police station and turned himself in. Meanwhile, Pang Xian convened a board meeting overnight to plot Wu Yuan's downfall. Unexpectedly, the directors had already switched sides and offered evasive responses. Precisely because Pang Xian was in a precarious position himself, Yan Weilan realized he had become a sacrificial pawn. He still wanted to fight for one last chance, only to be met with a warning from Pang Xian. The final meeting before LG Company's IPO, Pang Xian preemptively declared his vote for Wu Yuan. Fortunately, Wu Yuan arrived just in time to thwart his plan. She produced documents proving Queen Company's flaws. Its core product was completely useless. It turned out Su Fei had earlier informed Wu Yuan that LG insisted on acquiring Queen Company to meet IPO requirements. They had falsified accounts. After shareholders scrutinized the details, they concluded the IPO wasn't the priority. Instead, the focus shifted to determining who would assume the chairmanship. Ultimately, Wu Yuan secured the position as chairman. Li Lin successfully gained custody of her son and reunited with Su Gu. As for Yan Luan, he finally came to his senses. After apologizing to Su Fei, he turned himself in to the police. Queen Company returned to Su Fei and Sherbin's control. Yu accepted Yakai's proposal. All ended happily.